biggest football fan in the world, but I do know who Ronaldo de Lima is. So he was like 10 or 15 years ago. He was one of the best football players in the world. And according to many, he was the reason why Real Madrid was one of the most decorated clubs in the history of football. However, even for a club that has someone like Ronaldo, it is very important to have a strong organization behind it. So it is not only that Ronaldo builds the team and brings the success to it, but then there are also the coaches, doctors, grass cutters, line markers, psychiatrists, and even the guys that sell football shirts on the kiosk that is close to the stadium. So, but I think one of the most important things in football is to have a strong fan base. So much in a similar way, the state has its own fan base that we call citizens. It has its own doctors and coaches and players that we call politicians, administrative workers, police officers, and much in the same way it has its own fan base we know as citizens. But there is a difference. For example, if I cheered for Ronaldo's team 15 years ago, for Real Madrid, and if Ronaldo's team lost, the most that could happen to me is for 2 days I'll feel bad probably. I will lose my bragging rights against my friends that cheer for Barcelona, and I guess that would be it. However, if I'm a citizen of a country and I do not participate and take note of what my state does and how politicians behave, then those consequences can be felt severely, not only by myself, but also by my family members, friends, neighbors, and whoever else lives in my country. So, for that reason, I would like to present today how citizens can be more engaged into the policy-making process and how they can contribute with their own knowledge when bringing new decisions on the political agenda. And I will address 3 separate things in my speech today. Firstly, I will outline some of the main concerns that are related to political disengagement and why they derive. Secondly, I will talk about several proposals on how citizens can become more active in the policy-making process. And finally, I will give my conclusion, and later on, hopefully, I'll open up the floor for questions and hopefully have an interesting discussion. So currently, there is an ongoing trend of citizen disconnectedness from politics. Yesterday, we briefly mentioned the Edelman's Trust Barometer that was mentioned by our Brazilian colleagues that spoke about bots and governance. That basically says that there is a strong evaporation of trust in institutions and governments worldwide. People trust their politicians and their states much less than they did before. Now, to put this into perspective, for example, in the last US elections, there was a 68% voter turnout. Out of those 68% that voted, 45% voted for the current president, Donald Trump. That is 19% of the total American population chose to elect the current serving president, President Trump. Now my question is 19% enough for a representative democracy? Or is democracy only something that we do on the day when we have to vote, or is it an active process that we must be engaged in constantly? And that's where these policy proposals come in, that I'll mention them now. So the first one is we should take advantage of modern technologies to include citizens in decision-making processes. Currently, there are a couple of phone apps that are in development, made by NGOs and just people that are interested in bringing a more of a direct democratic way of running things. And one of the most interesting ones that I found was Flux Online. So basically, Flux is a phone app that you could download for free on the internet. And it helps you to cast a vote either to your local parliament when they pass a certain type of legislation, or if you want to vote for the local mayor, or maybe even a minister in your government. So it gives you all these possibilities that you could choose from and participate in your own country's governmental processes. So the role of the citizens, unlike of the one of the football fans, is you must be more active. So you must take note of what your government does, and you must watch carefully how decisions are made. We have a history of having career politicians that themselves only exist in the world of politics. And very often those same career politicians, which I'm not saying that necessarily they might be bad, but they may be subsidized in the future with experts that are, let's say, more focused in certain areas that need development. This type of change is known as issue-based politics, where instead of basing your decisions on intuition or something that's popular among people or something similar, you base them on your expertise. For example, instead of choosing someone that has been active 20 years in politics as your Minister of Education, you can choose someone who has already certain type of experience with educational institutions, and he's more probable, there is a higher probability that he will eventually bring a better result. So for all of you that are interested, you can Google Flux and you'll see what the story is about. Secondly, rather than limiting policymaking and citizen participation on a national level, what I think can be done is maybe more citizens can be included on a global level, where they can help out each other in solving local issues that previously were much more difficult to tackle. As Robin mentioned earlier, almost all the issues, the most pressing issues that we face today are global. And for example, if sea levels rise in Australia, they would most probably do in the Netherlands as well. And some countries are more vulnerable to these changes and have a higher incentive to influence in the decision-making process in systems that are, let's say, more fragile or are more inefficient. So, for example, let's say that you're a student and you lived in, I hope I pronounced it correctly, Agra, India, which is one of the most polluted cities in the world. What you can do as an individual is you can organize a protest, you can call your friends and you can organize a band, you can make songs about the pollution in the city, you can hashtag the hell out of the local factory that does the pollution on Instagram, and I think you would function within those boundaries. However, imagine if there is a platform that connects you with NGOs from all over the world and national governments that have the interest to make a change in your system, because they will also benefit from the good that you will receive if you change certain negative aspects on your local level. And thanks to technology, this can be done in a much more easier way than it was before. For example, if you're following the recent trend of real-life translators, where, for example, I could speak now in Macedonian language, and there is an app that can translate my language in real time in any other language that is out there. Currently, that app has not been taken to perfection, of course, it's still in development. However, it just makes me think of the possibilities in the future and how we can help each other out on the long run. Now, you may not recognize this fellow, but for me, he's one of the most interesting characters that I've heard of in the past couple of months. His name is Miles Solomon, and he's a 17-year-old from Britain. So in his spare time, he sits on Facebook, he plays Counter-Strike, and from time to time he follows data that is posted on the International Space Station website. Now, he has no PhD. He's in high school. I'm pretty sure he asks his parents whether he can go out or not, which is normal at that age, of course. But what he found was he found a flaw in the radiation measurement system at the International Space Station. And he sent an email to NASA, which is an agency part of the federal government of the United States, outlining this problem and just notifying them that that problem exists. So that they recognized their effort, his effort, and they made the change in the system. And I mean, I'm not sure that there will be a lot of people like him, but if we have these platforms that open up the possibility for people to participate in not only their own world, but also in other countries that are not geographically close to them, I think there will be a bigger chance of having a success on the long run. And thirdly, It is not only important for citizens to actively engage in debates on public issues and to go on town hall meetings and so on and so forth, but it is also important on the side of the government for those voices to be heard. An eminent scholar, probably you already know her, Deborah Stone, noted that, and I quote, "People value town meetings not because they render correct decisions, but because they offer individuals a chance to participate in policy-making decisions." Now, if citizens feel disengaged from what their government does, there is a high probability that there will be social unrest, that there will be protests, that there will be higher level of corruption. And if there aren't few too many eyes looking at politicians when they put their hands in the cookie jar, most probably these politicians would eat out all the cookies that probably belong to the public. So for that reason, it is highly important for us to make citizens more engaged with what the government does, so that we can prevent in the future all the negative consequences from democratic disconnect that exists today. Which brings me to my conclusion. Will citizen participation by itself enhance government performance? Absolutely not. However, there is a bigger chance that public officials will be more cautious when they'll bring decisions on both local and central level, firstly. And secondly, they will be more aware of the issues that their constituents face. So later on, when they'll build policies, they will know the preferences of their citizens, and they can build them in a more precise manner, in a more custom, tailored way, let's say. The citizen participation by itself means that governments will hear and do what the citizens want. Absolutely not. However, the sole idea of having your voice heard will decrease the possibility of political and economic upheavals, in my view. And for that reason, it is very important for politicians to hear these voices without maybe necessarily implementing them. And finally, I'm not saying that Flux or other similar platforms will bring very little results on the short run. However, it is very important to note that trial and error is a fundamental part of problem solving. And without trying and making mistakes, it would be impossible for us to make the changes necessary to improve our system. So as long as we try, even if we make mistakes, I think that on the long run, we're going in a good direction. So thank you for your attention.